Hi, I'm Rich Griffin. Welcome to a special edition of Exit Philosophy on the evening of the trade deadline. With three wild cards in each league and 15 teams out of 30 really believing that they had a chance to be contenders, it was always going to be a very busy week. And starting on July 24th, so for the last 8 days as we record, there were 54 deals involving player for player, involving a total of 156 different players. And the Blue Jays were very busy in that regard. And we'll go over that individually with each club with what we consider the top six winners at the trade deadline. And we'll talk about the Blue Jays in particular. But I think that the losing streak in Baltimore and the final game in Detroit really showed Ross Atkins and the Blue Jays front office the Achilles heel that really was the bullpen, the middle relievers. And if it hadn't happened then, they may not have made the deals that they did, but it really showed up in Baltimore when they gave up so many runs, 40 runs over a four-game stretch, whatever it was, and managed to come away with a win on Wednesday, although that was almost given away by the bullpen again. So, in a way, it was fortunate. They go into the trade deadline with a four-game lead over the Yankees. And the Yankees are one of the top six winners coming out of it, but we'll go over that. The Blue Jays, on the other hand, they made some deals, starting with the Tuesday game, the Tuesday trade for Seranthony Dominguez, the hard-throwing right-hander from Baltimore. And coincidentally, they were in between games of a doubleheader, and they had just given up a ton of runs in the first game and the two games leading up to that. So there was a certain amount of necessity as the mother of that invention. And there was a lot made as videos showed Seranthony Dominguez coming down the hallway to his new clubhouse. But it's not unique. I think the most unique one was Zane Smith when I was with the Montreal Expos. And he was acquired in Atlanta, from Atlanta, in a trade in, I think it was July 2nd of 1989. So he just walked down the hall, and there wasn't much made of it at the time. But a year later, on August the 9th of 1990, Zane Smith was traded to the Pirates as part of the Moises Alou deal, which turned out to be excellent for Montreal. But that deal to the Pirates was made while the Expos were in Pittsburgh. So in the two deals coming to the Expos and leaving the Expos, Zane Smith was traded in that stadium that the team was visiting. And so it was a total, I pasted off later, 243 combined steps to get from one team to the other twice. And the funny thing is that every time a player is traded, he has 72 hours to report. So he had 144 hours to go 243 paces. Just for those who were wondering if that was a first when Seranthony Dominguez came down the hall to the Blue Jays clubhouse. It wasn't, obviously. And in fact, later, Junior Caminero was traded just earlier on Thursday, on the trade deadline day, was traded from the Rays to the Yankees while they were completing a series at Yankee Stadium. So it happened twice in this one trade deadline period. So obviously more common than we may have thought. The Blue Jays, we talked about for the last little while, including appearances on TSN radio. We talked about what the Jays needed at the deadline, and we talked about two strong-armed relievers to bolster that bullpen in setting up Jeff Hoffman. And we talked about a starting pitcher because I'm of the belief that in August and September, the club would be better off, especially with the veterans that they have in the rotation, would be better off going to a six-man rotation. And in fact, on Blair and Barker on Sportsnet the Fan earlier today, David Price mentioned that it would be a good idea to go to a six-man or to consider a six-man if the right players were available, if the right pitchers were available. And clearly, when you trade for a rehabbing from Tommy John, former Cy Young Award winner, and Shane Bieber from the Cleveland Guardians, you are looking to make sure that he makes it through the season. He has not pitched a major league game since April of 2023. So he was rehabbing for that time period. He's made 4 minor league starts on a part of his rehab. He's on a 60-day IL. And you want him to be able to make 8 starts the rest of the way. And you want Jose Barrios to end up at his 32 starts for the season, which he's done for 6 full seasons in a row. His last 6 seasons, and as everyone knows who listens to Exit Philosophy, Jose Barrios in his entire major league career has never missed a start due to an injury. So if he makes his 32 starts under a 6-man formula, then you're making the right move, obviously. So there is a formula, and Pete Walker has seen it, where the most anybody's going to make between now and the end of the season is 9 starts. You can throw Shane Bieber in on the 13th of August or the 17th of August, and it works out where he gets 7 more starts. But it's something that the Blue Jays need to look into because heading into October, you want guys that are as well rested as possible. And when you've got a veteran rotation like Kevin Gausman, Barrios, you've got Chris Bassett, you got Max Scherzer, and now you've got Shane Bieber. That's a really good rotation if they're rested and healthy going into October. There's experience there. There's savvy. You could set up the top 3 in your starting rotation anyway, and you wouldn't be wrong with that group. And Eric Lauer, of course, would be the 6th man in that group, and he's done as good a job as anyone else in that rotation. So we'll have to see how that works out. But the Shane Bieber trade was not a bad deal. It was a pretty good deal considering the players that were available, the starting pitchers that were available over that period. I don't think if Bieber can make it through the season and through October, there is a $16 million club option for 2026, and that might be a consideration if it turns out that he can return to anywhere near what he had shown in his Cy Young year. As for the second reliever that we're talking about, there was a last-second deal that Ross Atkins pulled off with the Minnesota Twins, who were divesting themselves of almost all the veteran talent that they had. And it was Louis Varland who throws 98. So you're looking for 2 strong-arm relievers. Louis Varland, a right-hander, throws 98 with a heavy 88-mile-an-hour curveball as his second pitch. A lot of strikeouts, few walks, power arm. And Seranthony Dominguez, who has had trouble historically with left-handed hitters, but has added a sinker and is able to has had more success in the 2 innings against left-handed hitters than we've seen in his stats previously. So there's a guy with experience in the postseason, has had success in the postseason, and that's what the Jays are looking for. The Jays haven't obviously won a playoff series since 2015 and won a playoff game since 2016, the Edwin Encarnacion wild card home run. So that's what they're looking at. Shane Bieber and the 2 relief pitchers, the 2 strong arm relievers. And what happened also was they made a shrewd deal in terms of there's too many left-handed hitters on the bench and on the farm that had an opportunity to come up and play. So Will Wagner was sent to the San Diego Padres for catching depth. A guy named Brandon Valenzuela, who signed as a free agent, an international free agent in 2017. But Will Wagner was then replaced in the Twins deal by Ty France, who was, of course, an all-star a couple of years ago. And he is Will Wagner, only hitting from the right side. He plays first base mainly, but also plays second base, third base, and DH. And his bat is his main weapon. And Wagner showed that defensively he was a liability. And the Blue Jays under Ross Atkins are so intent on run prevention that they could afford to replace the same player only with a right-handed bat. And Ty France fills that bill and is a pretty good deal for the Blue Jays moving forward, at least for the rest of this season. But so basically, with the two new arms in the bullpen, the Blue Jays have five relievers, five leverage relievers that they can count on. They have Jeff Hoffman, Yariel Rodriguez, Brandon Little, and if you want a second left-hander, Mason Fluharty's done better the second time up than he did the first time up. And then when Jimmy Garcia returns, that's another arm that can go into that late inning high leverage spot. So there is a possibility that with a six-man rotation, more rest, going deeper into games, that they could get by with seven pretty good relievers in the bullpen, and just improving the bullpen by those two strong-armed right-handers is going to make a big difference down the stretch. So let's get to the top six winners and what happened to the other teams, the other contenders, and why they did not move up in the rankings. So number one on our list is San Diego Padres with AJ Preller. That's pretty much the consensus in terms of who succeeded, who had the best trade deadline moves. And we'll start with them adding Mason Miller from the Sacramento Athletics. And that was an untouchable. The guy throws 102 miles an hour. And he joins Robert Suarez. Their expectations were that Suarez would be traded after Miller was obtained, and that didn't happen. So now they've got Jason Adam, Suarez, and Mason Miller at the back end of their bullpen. And they added J.P. Sears, who was a left-hander that I liked, came from the Yankees, and had a decent time with the Athletics. Has had some good starts, some bad starts, but he's for a back end of the rotation for a contending team. He fits in nicely with the Padres. They also obtained Ryan O'Hearn and Ramon Laureano from the Orioles. They got Will Wagner, we mentioned before, from the Jays. And they got Nestor Cortez, who sort of was a throw-in from Milwaukee. And Freddie Fermin is a catcher who came in from Kansas City. So they're the winners in that trade deadline rankings. And the Dodgers really didn't do that much at the deadline. Of course, they've got so many players and so much salary locked up and even on the IL that they have all the money they need to make moves. It didn't seem that you want to go much higher, especially if guys are going to be coming back from the IL in the final 2 months of the season. So there'll be a tournament team in time for October. But right now, San Diego is the Padres are the winner in the early returns from the trade deadline. Second, and it's odd, second is the New York Mets, who have all the money in the world. And their last addition was center fielder Cedric Mullins from the Orioles, and that might complete them as an offensive and a defensive team. But where they did their best work was in the bullpen, and they already had Edwin Diaz. They had added Gregory Soto, a left-hander, in a leverage role. But they also had got Tyler Rogers, who gives them a different look. He comes from sidearm, below sidearm, almost scraping the dirt with his knuckles. And Ryan Helsley, another hard-throwing closer from the St. Louis Cardinals. And the Cardinals seem to have abandoned ship. They had a hot streak earlier on and were back into contention, and then went into a fade and at the trade deadline have thrown in the towel pretty much. Number 3 on the list of top 6 winners would be the New York Yankees. Sad to say, but it is the New York Yankees. They had added Ryan McMahon earlier, but at the deadline, they added, everybody seems to be going to relief. And we've talked about that over the years, about how World Series winners, all of a sudden, postseason winners, have relied so much on bullpen that the trade deadline seems to be the place where you decide we are going to go deep into October, so we need to build a bullpen that's 4 or 5 deep in terms of guys that can finish the 8th or 9th innings. And that's what the Yankees have done. They obtained David Bednar from the Pirates, which was a trade target that I thought that the Blue Jays might go after. But he ended up with the Yankees, as did Camilo Doval from the San Francisco Giants, who was their closer for a long time. So they've got 4 closers now, basically. And so their bullpen is set for a short series, 7-game series for sure. What they also did in a sneaky move is they got Jose Caballero, we mentioned before, who's played 7 positions, but one of them might end up being shortstop for the Yankees for a while because Volpe has been terrible defensively. He looks almost Steve Saxion in terms of his ability to throw and throw accurately, and it's a longer throw. So Caballero might get a shot at that, or Ahmed Rosario, who was also obtained earlier. But the Yankees still need to see that their starting pitching is in shape, but their bullpen definitely is ready for the postseason. That is if they even make the postseason, because they have been not playing very well since the All-Star break. Number 4 on the top 6 list is the Houston Astros, who were late arrivals at the party, but when they obtained Carlos Correa and found that he was willing to play third base for them for the rest of the season and was excited to be going back to Houston, then that became maybe the best or the most talent to move to a new team and to sort of set them back on course on the whole day, on the whole trade deadline day. They also got outfielder Jesus Sanchez from Miami, and he can crush right-handed pitching, and they are missing some key offensive players, so Sanchez could fit in nicely for the Astros for the final 2 months and into the playoffs. And the one move that you go, wait a second, they got Ramon Urias from the Orioles, but that was before they knew they were going to get Carlos Correa. So he's a third baseman. They're going to have to figure out what to do with him. The trade deadline's gone. There's no second trade deadline. So, he can be a utility guy coming off the bench for them, or they can find a spot for him, maybe play a little first base. Of course, we talked about the Blue Jays. They're my number 5 in terms of doing what they needed to do at the deadline. And that we discussed the 2 strong-armed relievers, the starter, to give them the possibility of going to a 6-man rotation, which would be highly recommended because of the length of the season, the age of the Blue Jays rotation, and the fact that you want to go deep into October. So the plan is there. The plan has been laid out with dates where none of the six starters would have to pitch on a fifth day. Everybody would have at least one extra day, the entire stretch drive, which could only benefit, especially with the names that you have listed there. There's no weak link. Eric Lauer has stepped up and become the man in terms of being the surprise guy of the season. And with Max Scherzer back and seemingly able to control the injury that was affecting his thumb, which was affecting his entire body. If he can stay healthy, if Shane Bieber can come back, and the other three guys we know have always been healthy, then that would be the way to go as far as August and September, and being able to hang on to what now is a 4-game lead over the Yankees and a 5-game lead over the Red Sox. And speaking of the Red Sox, they didn't do very much in terms of helping themselves. They added old friend Steven Matz as his swingman, either long relief, left-hander, long relief, and of course he pitched for the Blue Jays in 2020, or 21-22. And then they got Dustin May from the Los Angeles Dodgers, which I don't think is enough to give them a top 6 rating. And as soon as they gave up Devers to San Francisco, I think they had written the season off. So the fact that they were playing better ball did not convince them to go all in at the trade deadline. So they were sort of iffy and half-hearted in their efforts to get better. But so that leaves the AL East, in my opinion, with Tampa Bay also bailing. And the Orioles just divested. Too bad that the Jays didn't get to play the Orioles after the trade deadline, because they would have been short a lot of guys that hurt the Jays over the 4 games that they played in a steamy Baltimore. And so the 6th team on the list, and they didn't do a lot, but they didn't have to do a lot. The Philadelphia Phillies. They added a closer, a legit closer, throws 100, Joan Duran, and he came from the Twins, as a lot of really talented pitchers and players did on this deadline. He went to the Phillies, where, of course, they started the season with Jordan Romano, and he didn't do the job. And then their closer was suspended for steroid use. And now they've got one of the best closers in the game. And so even though they didn't do much, they also added Harrison Bader, the outfielder. But other than that, not a lot needed to be done for the Phillies. So because they were already a strong team, great rotation, they needed a closer. How many games did they lose in the first 3 months because they were finding out that they didn't really have a closer at that point? So they lost a lot of games. If they nail those games down, that could be all they need down the stretch to become a World Series participant. And the other teams, some of the other contenders that were sort of fringy on the borderline of being on this list: Texas Rangers, Detroit Tigers added 7 pitchers, but 7 pitchers, that could disrupt clubhouse chemistry as far as I'm concerned. They had a couple of starting pitcher injuries and they filled them in. They got Charlie Morton, which isn't going to help. Then you got the Red Sox. The Mariners had a head start on everybody. They got Josh Naylor at first base, and then they got a Junio Suarez on the 30th. So on Wednesday they made that deal, and it looked like they were on their way, but they could not come through with much more in terms of adding to that mix. And so they probably sixth, seventh, or eighth on the trade deadline ranking. The Brewers, the Cubs, the Reds. In fact, the entire NL Central did not do a lot in terms of making moves. You had Cleveland, Kansas City made a couple moves, Minnesota, the White Sox. There was not a lot going on in terms of improvement in the AL Central, so it'll be interesting to see how that division. It looks like that division is only going to produce one playoff team, obviously with four of them already under 500. So that's a wrap up of the trade deadline day, and we will see how the Jays do on the weekend against Kansas City Royals. And Mal Romanen and I will be back at you early next week with another scheduled edition of Exit Philosophy. Hope you enjoyed the coverage of the trade deadline. It was a very busy day. I was riveted. I don't think I ever have been before in terms of the MLB trade deadline compared to, say, the NHL. But this was a tremendous day of activity for baseball and an interesting discussion moving forward as to who had the best day. But the Blue Jays did do what they needed to do. And if all players perform like they should, and if Dalton Varsho, Alejandro Kirk, George Springer, and Andres Jimenez, if they all come back healthy, then the offensive side of the ball will be taken care of. The run prevention has been improved with the bullpen, with the arms that they acquired in the bullpen. And so we'll see how it goes for the final 2 months of the season. And until the middle of this week, this is Exit Philosophy signing off with a special edition, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.